everybody! Welcome to our full set review for Tarkir Dragonstorm. My name's Nicole. You probably know me already if you're coming from YouTube. I do have a special friend here, someone that I cherish a lot and I really appreciate in the testing process. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm one of Nicole's Sanctum teammates and also kind of a limited player content creator, so I'm excited to be here.
This is exciting. So Ryan and I both are like relatively new to the PT like thing. I think I have a couple more PTs. Ryan's first event was Worlds, but I think because of that we've meshed on the like testing side of things a fair bit, and I'm just very excited to do this. So we anticipate this being kind of long, so I am just gonna hop right into it. So I am going to talk a little bit about how we plan on doing this, and then Ryan can go into it a little bit more. We're going to look at the multicolor signpost cards first. Um, I do this when I draft. Like the first thing I look at are the signpost cards, and then I learn kind of where the set goes from there because it helps you understand the mechanics a little bit better. And so we're going to look at just the signpost uncommons, and then we're going to hop into white from there. We're going to do commons, uncommons, and then rares. And so that is kind of the order we're going to go in. Do you want to give any sort of like primer before we start?
Yeah, so this set is a little bit weirder than most because it's a tricolor set. For people who haven't done one of those recently, I don't think there have been many in the past year or two. So we wanted to cover the two color uncommon draft signposts, is what they're called. Wizards puts these in most sets, but in this set it's a little bit different because these are going to be the enemy color two color pairs that you're going to want to get into early in your drafts because they can branch out into two different clans, the three color pairs. So, for example, black green can go either Sultai, blue black green, or Abzan, white black green. And so, if you start your draft off kind of solidly in one of these enemy colored two color spaces, that's kind of the like standard way to draft a weird three color set like this. So that's why we wanted to start with those. But then from there, we're just going to be doing white, blue, black, red, green, multicolor, lands, and colorless, kind of like a normal organization of the set by color. Just wanted to start with these because they are sort of like identifying what spaces, what archetypes are going to be like supported with the design of the set. And then the other thing we should probably talk about before I get into it is the grading scale we want to use. So this is one that I came up with my roommate Mora when we did our Aether Drift set review, and we found it worked pretty well for us. It's very simple. It's just a 1 through 10 scale, where 1 is the strongest possible card, the grade you could give a card. Pretty much always a first pick, a bomb, you always pick it. And 10 is you really never have to prioritize this card. You'll always see it late. You usually don't even want to put it in your deck, that kind of thing. So it's less of a how objectively strong is the card and more how highly do you have to prioritize that card in drafts. It's for people who are familiar with 17 lands data, it's like the average last CNAT of a card. We're sort of assigning a card like a grade about where you need to pick it in the draft. Yeah, Nicole, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think before we start with the first card, I'm just going to give one little more tidbit. Uh, my content is typically pretty directed towards some people that are newer to the competitive scene. If you've never heard the term enemy colors or something like that, I remember being so confused the first time I heard this and I never understood. If you look at the back, I have a magic card here. If you look at the back of a magic card, there's the
Great
colors
thing to
on it.
explain. Yeah.
The enemy colors are the ones that are furthest apart. So in the example that Ryan just gave, green is over here and black is over there. So those are the enemy colors. And so, like white is an enemy color of black, blue is an enemy color of red. They're the ones that are kind of the farthest apart from each other. So that's just if you're ever
And I
confused
think
about
even to
those.
go, yeah, that's a good thing to point out because older in Magic's history, they used to mechanically like show that certain colors were enemies more. Like white would have cards that hated on black cards, and black would have cards that hated on white cards. They don't really do that anymore, so I think it's kind of out of circulation to sort of think of different color pairs as like enemies or allies is the other one. But yes, that is what we mean by enemy colors. So like blue and red, black and green. If you look on the back of the magic card, exactly, that's the way to do it, is just how to identify what's an enemy color from each other, what's an enemy color pair. Um, And again, I think just to, if you look at the back of your magic card, keep looking at it. Uh, the three color pairs in this set are a little bit different. There's a couple ways. This is kind of complicated to explain. There's a few different ways you can do three color pairs, and the ones in this set are not circle three colors that are next to each other. They're circle two colors and then the one color that's like an enemy from both of those colors. So you can see, like in the top left, you would circle white green, and then you'd go all the way down to the right, bottom right, and circle black. That's how you get Abzan. And so those five three color pairs are the three color pairs in this set, which is why the enemy color two color pairs are the intersection between the clans, the three color clans in this set. A little bit complicated, but it is kind of an important thing to understand if you're going to be playing limited, because you want to set yourself up well color wise to be flexible in the draft. And so that is actually a pretty fundamental thing that's going on that we wanted to be really clear about from the beginning of the set review, because it's going to inform a lot of our opinions and our grades. In most sets, you're picking a white card and you could kind of pair that with any other color. But in this set, you really want to pair that white card with either red or black. You don't want to necessarily pair it with green or blue, because those are white's allies and they're going to be less overlapping with multiple paths you could take toward your clan. Anyway, all that out of the way, we
All
can maybe
right.
jump into the cards.
Great. So let's start with the first card. This is Stalwart Successor. It is one black and green for a 3/2 creature with menace. Whenever one or more counters are put on a creature you control, if it's the first time counters have been put on that creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So while we're doing this, I have the little like box insert that Wizards uses to kind of tell you what the color pairs are. And they actually have done it similarly. They have the 3 color pairs and the 2 color pairs on it. And so the 2 color one for black green is use counters of any kind, not just +1/+1 counters, to make your creatures formidable in combat. That seems to be consistent.
Yep, this
All right, what do
seems
you think?
totally on theme. This is like a pretty good rate, I would say, vanilla wise for a creature. 3 mana, 3/3, or yeah, 3/2 menace. Um, that's solid. It's not anything spectacular. And then the ability, it kind of depends. It's going to depend on how many ways you have to give counters to things, but that's very strong. Anytime you're giving a counter, you also put another +1/+1 counter. If you get one or two of those kind of triggers or procs of that, it's going to be really valuable. So this is a strong card, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say I probably put it, without seeing the rest of the set, between like 5 and 6 would be my guess. Maybe, I guess it depends on the power level of the set. But it's an effect that's definitely useful, but it does require other things to work. And so, 3 mana, 3/2 menace is not a terrible base rate, but it does need other things to function. And so I'm not taking this like super highly pack one, pick one. But if I have things that it works with, then, the priority gets a little bit higher.
Yeah, I'm definitely not first picking this, but I could see it being a card that I pick up early-ish in the draft and that like influences my direction. So yeah, I think somewhere I would probably give it like a 5. I think I'm picking it like mid pack one.
All right. Sounds good. Do you want to go
Next
back
up,
and forth on who reads it?
yeah, for sure. So next up, we have Host of the Hereafter, which is 2 black green for a 2/2 zombie warlock. It enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, so it's really a 4/4, not a 2/2 for 4. And then whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to one target creature you control. So 4 mana, 4/4, and then all your creatures, for people who remember like modular back in Mirrodin, all of your creatures basically have that for any of their counters. So your counters sort of don't leave the battlefield unless the creature gets exiled. If your creatures die, the counters stay. Um, that's a strong ability. If you're in a deck, and I think black green, if your deck is base black green, whether you're in Abzan or Sultai, I think you will have a good amount of creatures that by default have counters, and some of their power and toughness not going away when they die, and being able to keep that on the board, or abilities, counters, or whatever. That's a valuable ability. 4 mana 4/4 is fine stats wise. It's not incredible. This feels similar to me. I would say it's like middle of the pack. It's certainly better than your average limited card, but doesn't blow me away. So I think also I would give this probably like a five.
Okay, so I feel pretty similarly. I think that I value cards like this a little bit higher than I valued the previous card. The reason I do that is because it feels like this card does a little bit more standalone, where the other card kind of needs a little bit more help. So I'm probably picking this a little higher than the card before it. So if we called the last one a five, I'm probably calling this one a six. I like this card. As soon as I see stuff like this in the format, one of the first things I'm thinking about in the draft is what exile effects there are in terms of removal, and then also like bounce effects. If we look at Aether Drift, you talk about like bounce off, for example. If there ends up being a lot of effects like this where that's relevant, then I value cards like that a little bit higher because it, can kind of help shut down synergies. So that's what I think about when I see this card. I'm going to give it a six.
Just to be clear, does that mean it's better or worse than the previous card?
I think it's better
Lower
than the
is
previous
better.
card.
Okay, so a
What was
four.
that? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. So if I give the last one a five, then I'm giving this one a four.
Yep. Yep. And
Okay,
I think I
one is
agree.
good,
I
one
would
is
say
bad.
this
We're
is like
learning.
marginally better. I don't know if it's like a difference of a grade better, but like somewhere around there. Yeah, like a four and a half maybe for me, something like that. I agree.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
prefer this one if I see both of them in a pack. And
All
then
right.
clearly, black green is about counters. I think we've learned that from these two cards. Woo.
All right, so now we are looking at Marshal of the Lost. So white black, according to the archetype sheet, is sacrifice. Sacrifice your extra creatures, such as temporary creatures, from mobilize to get extra use out of those creatures. So mobilize, for those that don't know, is a mechanic where when a creature attacks, it makes a certain number of tokens that I believe they're one something
I think it's a
tokens,
warriors
and then
probably.
yeah, and then in the end step they sacrifice. So it's a little different than the normal white black sacrifice where you're like kind of counting on making things and sacrificing them. They kind of sacrifice automatically. So it looks like that's what white black is looking at. This card is called Marshal of the Lost. It is white black 2 for a death touch 3/3. Whenever you attack, target creature gets plus X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures.
They've made a couple of these attack triggers that are going to be really annoying to stack on Arena with your mobilize effects because you're going to need to make sure that your creatures come in first and then this finishes targeting something and gives it plus X for your number of creatures. But anyway, that minor point out of the way. Seems like another pretty strong card. You can target anything. It doesn't just target itself, but it can target itself. So by default, this is a 4/4 Death Touch attacker, I believe, which is a strong attacker. And then any number of other attackers you have beyond that, it's going to get really big. And then it can also distribute that power toughness somewhere else. So that's really flexible. And it's not a bad blocker either. Like 3/3 is kind of a small body, but Death Touch really kind of makes up for that, I would say. This is a really strong card. I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I think this card also gets a lot stronger. There's two different kinds of like attack triggers they print nowadays. There's whenever you attack or whenever this card attacks, and this is a card that I think gets a lot stronger because it says whenever you attack. It doesn't
Oh, I
need to be
didn't
that
even notice that.
specifically. Yeah, it
That's
doesn't need to be
great.
specifically that this creature is attacking, which means you could put this off on the side of the board. You could treat it as an enchantment if you wanted and just leave it as a blocker. You don't have to put this card at risk to get this effect. Which with mobilize probably means that whatever creature gets made big every turn almost needs to be blocked, or your life total is kind of going to be at risk. So I think this card seems pretty strong to me. I'd probably give it I think for pack like auto picks, it's probably going to be like ones and twos type things. I'm anticipating giving this like a 3 to a 4, like a 3.5 maybe is where I see in my head.
Yeah, I with that templating that you pointed out, that whenever you attack, that's really strong. They print that on some creatures these days, and this is the strongest version of that I think we've ever seen. Because this basically now has haste when it comes down. It can give whatever you're attacking with that turn a pump. I I agree. I think ones and twos are kind of like the auto picks. I might give this like a 2.5 or something. I think this might be like a premium uncommon. It's just so strong. I'm imagining playing this on turn four when you've played. There's like a white common that has mobilized three, is a three drop, and like that's just a beating when you play this and then attack with that. So Yeah, I mean, that's just like a normal common into this curve. And any number of just like normal creatures on the board, this is going to make their blocks almost impossible. So I'm leaning like three at least, maybe even like a 2.5 for this. It's really strong.
Yeah, I like it. I'm gonna call it a 3, just for total
I'm
sakes.
high on Marshal of the Lost. Let's put it that way.
I like this card, yeah. Okay, so this card is called Hardened Tactician. I'm reading it at active time and I'm already excited. It's 1 white and black for a 2/4 creature. It has 1 sacrifice token draw card. So we discussed mobilize being the mechanic where, the creatures kind of get sacked in the end step anyway. I already like effects that sack things to draw cards typically. I'm a limited player that really likes value. I really like drafting decks that, draw a lot of cards and kind of end up with more cards than your opponent. And this seems really interesting to me because mobilize is generally, I think, a pretty aggressive mechanic. It's ways to like push damage pretty fast. And this is a way to turn that aggressive mechanic into cards so you don't run out of cards in an aggressive deck. This card looks really strong to me. I This seems like a card I would value pretty highly. I don't know. How do you feel?
I agree. Both of these black white uncommons feel very premium to me. I think this one notably is like significantly lower floor, where if you just don't have a mobilized card with this, it's not doing that much. Like it's a 3 mana 2/4, which is a respectable body, but nothing amazing. Um, but a single mobilized creature, and this is just like a draw engine every turn. If your creature has mobilized that's greater than one, this is literally just drawing you multiple cards every turn for some mana for sure. But like that's insane. That's really really strong. So this to me feels more like a combo-y payoff card, like kind of a build around. But it's a very good one. I think it's well worth going for probably. So yeah, I'm happy giving this like a three in terms of I would speculate on this early in a draft just for its power level.
Yeah, I agree. It does, based off what we've seen so far, my immediate assumption that says that the power level is pretty high, which,
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of picking up too. It's hard to get a read sometimes because like for foundations, for example, the power level was super low because that was very corsety. And then Aether Drift kind of in the middle, like green was really good, but the other colors weren't so good. I think there's a lot of sweet high power level like multicolor cards in this format, and I think they've juiced the commons a little bit even also to kind of make up for it. So that's something to note is like we might be biasing a little bit towards higher grades just because all of the cards seem quite strong.
yeah. So we talked about this. This is specifically going to air after the Shuffle Up and Play for Tellurian Community College. So if you didn't know, I was a guest on Tellurian Community College for the standard Shuffle Up and Play for Tarkir. Very exciting. Um, and I remember reading this set, and I was building a standard deck, and I was like, man, I can't wait to get limited. I was so excited for the limited for this set. Um, so, fun fact, if you have not seen the episode yet, I know Ryan doesn't know any of this yet. One of the cards I built around was Kish the Skimmer. I think this card's very, very cool. I talk about that I like value a lot. So the blue-green archetype is leaves the graveyard. You fill up your graveyard, and then you either use Harmonize, Renew, or other methods to get bonuses for your cards leaving the graveyard. So Harmonize is a mechanic. It's similar, sort of, to Flashback. Like if you combine Flashback and Convoke into like one little brainchild, you can use a creature on your field, and you can tap it to use its mana value towards the casting cost from your graveyard, and then you can exile it to cast it from your graveyard. So there's lots of cool things that leave the graveyard. So Kish the Skimmer, I'm gonna read this one. You can read the next one. Is blue green for a 2/2 with flying. Whenever a card leaves your graveyard during your turn, draw a card. And it triggers only once each turn. So it depends a lot on what the set ends up looking like in a limited environment. But I love effects like this. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, seems very strong. Like 2 mana 2/2 flyer, quite good, like totally playable. And then if it at any point draws you a card, that's well worth your investment. It's notable just like 2 drop multicolor cards are definitely harder to splash, so you kind of do really want to be base blue green. Although this card won't be bad if you can draw a card with it later in a game. So, I could see playing it and not necessarily playing it planning to play it on turn 2. Um, but I would strongly prefer to be in a like base blue green deck if I'm playing this. Um, yeah, very good. Like similar to all these other signpost uncommons, I'd probably give this a three, a four, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'm probably giving it a 4. The only reason I'm giving it a little bit lower of a grade, I guess there's two reasons. One, is the 2 mana requirement. You know, tapping for 2 specific colors, in a format where we anticipate playing 3 colors a lot is sometimes kind of difficult. And then it does also feel like this one needs a little bit more to enable it. Like Mobilize is printed on a lot of cards, and
Yeah, we
is
should
a
talk about the
mechanic that
sell
like,
time mechanic. I
oh
forget what it's
yes,
called. It's like revitalize or something.
Renew, I think, is
Renew,
the
probably. Yeah.
yes. I If you want to talk for a couple seconds, I will
Yeah.
pull up
So the
something
sell
that
time
has Renew.
mechanic is exiling creature cards from your graveyard for a mana cost, and what I believe they mostly or all do is give counters to your other creatures. But there's also a lot of cards like this one that trigger off of creature cards leaving your graveyard. That's kind of what Sultai is doing in this set. So
Yeah, so I
this
have
is
a
definitely
Renew card
playing
in
in
front
that
of me,
space.
and it is exactly that. This one has a mana cost. It says exile this card from your graveyard, put 2 counters and a flying counter on target creature. And then it does say activate only as a sorcery. I believe they are all like that. And that is relevant for cards like Kishla Skimmer because this card says it can only trigger once each turn. And so that means that it kind of caps it at only triggering during your turn if all of the effects are sorcery effects rather than instant effects.
Yep. And notably,
Um,
also the black green cards, the ones that care about counters, are also going to work with these cards. So we're seeing both the blue green and the black green signpost uncommons be kind of tied to Sultai space a little bit. Although I guess there's also, yeah, Harmonize works with this too. For Harmonize, by the way, I had thought this is the kind of misconception that's good going into a set to clarify. Does it discount their cost for their mana value or for their power for
oh, I
Harmonize?
might be backwards.
I actually don't
Um,
remember which one it is, so we should clarify that.
yes, I will check while I have the pre-release primer up. Harmonize. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its harmonize cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power. Okay, so you're
Okay.
better. You got it
Harmonizes
more correct than
power.
I did.
Got it. Okay.
So it's power.
So I don't think that really changes our evaluation on any of these cards, but just so that we, have it right. Um, yeah, this is a really strong card. Works in both blue green, clans. Uh, Very strong. But I agree with you. I think like a little bit worse than those black white cards, just because um, I think that being a multicolor two drop makes it a little bit harder to, you know, fit cleanly into a deck unless you happen to be exactly in the blue green space.
Yeah. All
Cool.
right. Our other blue green signpost uncommon. Would you like to read this one?
Yeah, this is Auroral Procession. So this is blue green, again, same mana cost for an instant, and it just says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. I don't really know how to evaluate this kind of effect very well in limited. It can be quite strong in a lot of games, but kind of on a fundamental level, like in limited, a lot of your cards are of similar power level, and so it can often be not incredibly strong to just spend 2 mana to get back a card you cast earlier in the game. We are noting though that like there's explicit synergies in both of the blue green spaces with this. Um, so that matters obviously, and then of course getting back a bomb. If you have a bomb in your deck, this gets significantly better as just a way to recur that. It can get any card, so it doesn't have to be a permanent, doesn't have to be a creature, which mostly these effects are. It's an instant, which is really nice. So they kind of tweaked all of the knobs on this card to make it really strong, and I think it probably will be strong. But I don't think I'm prioritizing this very highly in drafts. What about you?
Yeah, I think I agree. This is a card. When you have people that do limited set reviews, most of the time they play a lot of limited, and one of the easiest ways to get power level for these cards are to compare them to cards that you've had in limited sets in the past. And this one does not have a lot of precedent for it, which I think is where the kind of uncertainty comes. It depends. Cards like this are going to depend on a lot of things. Exactly what Ryan said. If you have bombs, it gets a little bit better because you want to get them. If you have a lot of things that mill, so like for example, in the previous set, Black Green's mechanic was like graveyards, and so you had like Dredger's Insight and things that filled your graveyard. If you have cards like that, this probably gets a little bit better. But I don't think I'm picking it highly. I think this is a thing where like if I'm already in these colors and I think I have something I want to get with it, then I'm probably considering taking it, but I don't anticipate wanting this card until I have a reason for it. And so I'm probably valuing it a little lower. I anticipate putting this somewhere between like 5 and 6, leaning towards 6 is my
I think I'd
instinct.
honestly give this like a 7. Like I don't think I'm taking this unless I'm later in the pack and already know that I'm in blue green. So I
Yeah,
honestly would say like even though in the deck it might be reasonably powerful, I think I'm prioritizing this at least in pack one more like a 7 or even an 8. Honestly,
I agree. It is notable that unlike Kishel Skimmer, where we talked about that blue green was like a pretty restrictive mana cost, this is a card you're almost never playing on turn 2, and so
yeah,
the
you can
mana cost
splash
being restrictive
this.
is less relevant.
You can splash it, although you wouldn't often want to. Although when you do, it is really relevant that like it doesn't really matter when you play it; it'll have a high impact. So yeah,
Yeah.
totally
Weird
splashable
card.
card. Weird card. I agree.
All right. So now we're going into blue red. The archetype for blue red is two spells. Use harmonized spells frequently in order to reap the rewards from flurry. So flurry is, if I remember correctly, similar to storm. There's also tons of cards in this set that say, if this is the second spell you cast this turn, or something like that, or if you cast two spells this turn, and so that's kind of the mechanic there. This card is called Glacial Dragon Hunt. It is blue and red for a sorcery. Draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Glacial Dragon Hunt deals 3 damage to target creature. And then, if that wasn't enough, it also is harmonized. So for 4 blue and a red, this is the mechanic we were talking about. You can cast a card from your graveyard for its harmonized cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power. Then exile the spell. Um, I remember reading this card and being like, wow, the rate on this card's really high. You get to draw and discard, so like you get to filter your hand, and then you also get to deal 3 damage to a creature. Especially, a lot of the time, effects like this you want to use when you're flooding, and so it is relevant that it says non-land. But this set has a lot of cards that get benefits just from being in the graveyard. They have harmonized stapled onto them, things like that. I anticipate this card being pretty strong, and removal is always a great thing to have, and so I'm probably valuing this card pretty highly. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah, this is a very weird card to evaluate just based on how it's like worded. But fundamentally, the main thing this is doing is being a 3 damage removal spell. It's just kind of weird how you get there. You do have to discard a non land, so the selection on the looting is a little bit worse than you would normally get if you need to use it as a removal spell. But there's a ton of optionality. You can kind of use it however you want late in the game. If there's not a relevant creature to kill, just discard your land that you don't need, and you basically drawn an extra card. And then the harmonize is really nice as well. I don't know exactly how to evaluate this. It's sort of somewhat different from a lot of the removal spells, the kind of more straightforward removal that I've seen in limited a lot. But any which way you slice it, very strong card. So I'd probably start at like a 4 for this, maybe. I
Yeah,
think it's
four
not
was
pulling me clearly into blue red, but if I'm there, I'm very happy to have it.
4 was definitely what I was anticipating. I'm a little nervous with the power level of the set and it being a set that has like lots of big dragons and things like that. We've seen a couple 4 toughness things already. That
Yeah.
this might have the lightning strike problem with Aether Drift, where you were like, oh, lightning strike is such a great base rate card, and then 3 damage just doesn't do very much. And so its final grade will end up being, I think, pretty dependent on how the set plays. But I think at base, I'm pretty happy saying 4. This card seems pretty strong.
Yeah, I'm good with that. But I think noting that like we should watch out for the combat math and the toughness math in this set because it might be worse than we're saying. Yeah.
Especially if they're it gets a little better if the set's really aggressive and you need to kill like the things that make mobilize tokens or something, and it gets a little worse if there's a lot of big creatures. So it's pretty dependent on how the set ends up
Right.
playing.
And just also noting, like, we went into Aether Drift thinking it was going to be a really fast format because it's the racing set. We're going into this thinking, hey, it's probably going to be a little slower because it's the three color set. Sets can surprise us, so we're not going to assume that we're right about that. We're just noting that, like, it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so next we have Effortless Master, 2 blue red for a 4/3 with Vigilance and Menace, and it enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn. So most of the time, what that just means is you need to cast another spell and then this, which means that you need access to probably something like 6 mana at least, which is a lot of
Yeah.
mana. But this does come in as a 6/5 Menacer if you do that, which is certainly worth, that's like a very powerful late game body. So it seems like this is well statted at any point in the curve where you cast it. Not amazingly statted, but like quite strong. Vigilance and Menace together are kind of nice. Um,
Yeah.
but ultimately, this
I'm
is sort of just a creature. Like, it's not really doing much else.
Yeah, I'm always a little skeptical of mechanics that are built to require other cards. Like a lot of the black white cards, they require other mechanics, but this card, like anything where you need to cast two or more spells, it means that most turns you're only going to want to cast one spell. And then the turns that you do cast two spells, you need to be able to kind of have enough cards to make it worth it. And so I'm a little nervous about this mechanic being a little bit more underpowered than the other mechanics in the set. You're not going to want in your green black counters deck, you'll be happy if every single card says, you know, this enters with a counter or something with a counter, where you're not going to want all of your cards to say whenever you cast two or more spells, you got to cast one of them first. And so I'm a little nervous on how this mechanic is going to play generally. I think you're only going to want a certain number of cards that say two or more spells. And so I probably am not valuing this card super highly at base. Probably like a 6 if I had to guess. Like if I'm in these colors and this is a useful card, I'll take it, but I'm not prioritizing it.
I agree. Yeah, like I share the same concerns with the double spell mechanic, flurry, I think it's called, just because like it's sort of incentivizing you for something you already want to do in limited. And that sounds good because it's like, oh, I just get to do things I already want to do and then I get rewarded. But that can often turn into a very win more thing where if you're already able to do things that are good, then you get more things that are good. But if you can't do those things, then your cards kind of just don't work. So it can be very snowbally and kind of like tricky to set up. I'm worried about that for sure. But I do think they've probably built in some cards in the format that are trying to enable this kind of thing. Probably some one drops that can trip or do so otherwise like do things that easily let you cast two spells. And then if you get this out on turn 5, it's very strong. 6/5 Vigilance Menace is really good, but and the floor isn't that low either. The floor is not too bad. A 4 mana 4/3 Vigilance Menace, but the upside really isn't there that much. So I agree. I'm pretty low on this. I might even give it like a 7. I just can't see myself prioritizing this very highly in a draft. I just don't think this is the payoff that you're really going for. Is like this is going to make my deck super good.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Our next card is in red white. So red white is go wide tokens. Blitz by your opponent with sheer numbers. Use mobilize tokens and flurry rewards to build impressive battlefields. So this card is called Pori Mountain Stalwart. It is 1 red and white for a 3/3. And it's got Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. So, I think this card seems totally fine at base. It's a 3 mana 3/3, which is okay. It definitely seems like these colors are a lot more built to play as the 3 color combination rather than the 2 color combinations. Like you have the card that benefits if you cast the second spell, and then the red white cards that trigger when you cast the second spell. So this one really does seem like it's going to fit pretty well into the 3 color kind of archetype rather than the 2 color one. It seems interesting. Things like this change kind of how aggressive formats end up being. If you have lots of like 1, 2, 3 mana cards where starting on turn 4 you're going to double spell every turn, you're going to see this drain for 2 add up really quickly. And so I anticipate this being really strong in the aggro decks. I'm not sure how strong the aggro decks will end up faring in the format, but it does seem like a pretty strong card at base to me.
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things going on with this one. So like 2 damage and you gain 2 to your opponent. That's an effect that stacks really well. Like the more times you can trigger it, each time is getting like better value. But I also think it's quite hard to have multiple turns where you cast multiple spells because you're using your spells to trigger this. So there's kind of some tension there. Um, and then, yeah, like there's also just some tension with, how aggressive are you? This is a multicolor card. It can be difficult to kind of balance those two things. I'm not super excited about the overall package here. it's not bad, but like at the end of the day, if this is the payoff I'm getting for all the work I've put in to be able to double spell a lot, it's fine, but it's I don't think it's like winning me the game on its own necessarily. It might close a game that otherwise I wouldn't have a way to close, but I think there's a lot of cards that can serve that role. So this doesn't read as premium to me. Like 3 mana 3/3 bodies in limited, they're fine if they do other valuable things, but they're no longer like fine defensible like on their own. And so I really
Mhm.
need the ability to be doing a lot here. And I don't think it's doing that much. I think I'm not totally sold on this. I'd probably give it like a 7.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more excited about this effect generally. That also might just be because I play a lot of decks that hold a lot of value, and so anything that is like remotely aggressive is always a little better versus me. I was probably giving it like a 6. Um, it will definitely depend on how much kind of replenishment there is to be able to do this, multiple times throughout a game.
Yeah,
So I guess
this
we'll
this
see.
card very much depends on how strongly they're supporting that mechanic. If you can expect to do it a lot, then this card's really good. If you can expect to consistently do it only once or twice a game, I'm a little skeptical. So yeah, somewhere around 6 or 7 I like.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, unlike that, this card.
This card's a banger. So we've got Frontline Rush. This is red white for an instant. You choose one. You can either create two 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, or you can give target creature plus X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So yeah, this is at baseline like 2 mana rally or raise the alarm. I think it's called. Basically, just make two
Mhm.
bodies at instant speed for 2 mana if you're in red white. But it also, with your mobilized creatures, picture it, right? You're attacking with like 2 to 3 creatures, and two of them have mobilize. So you're making like 5, 6 bodies or something on your attacks. Very unlikely that your opponent can block all of those, right? And then whatever
Nor
they
do they
don't
really
block,
want to, because they're going to sacrifice anyway.
exactly, right? Like they probably don't want to block all your 1/1s that are going to die anyway. So on blocks, you target one of them, and this is just a 2 mana deal 6, which that's a really strong rate. Obviously, you kind of need like a reasonable combat setup to do that, but I think this is going to close a lot of games, and you're going to realize that you're dead in combat math to this card so much.
Yeah,
This is a
I think
very
this card's
scary
going to be
card.
really good.
Yeah, I agree. It both enables and pays you off for the things the deck wants to do, which is just really strong. Yeah, I'm giving this. I think I prioritize this highly. I think this is one of the stronger things for red white to be doing. Like, if I'm in red white, I don't think I should be in red white unless I can pick up at least two of this card. Probably.
Hmm.
That's what I'm going to guess. So I'm giving this probably like a 3 or a 4. At the end of the day, it's not a card that's going to win a game on its own. You need other stuff to kind of set up, but it's a really good payoff, and it's a pretty decent enabler too. So that's kind of all you can ask for in like a 2 mana instant speed package.
Yeah. I think I anticipate this being a 3. Razy or not Razy Alarm, but like any trumpet blast type effect where your creatures get like +X+X or something. Those cards are always, playable and limited. And the fact that this one both has an effect where you like have an attack trigger and it does something else if you are unable to kind of make that part work, I think this card's gonna be great.
And for what it's worth,
All
you
right.
can kind of think of this as similar to a trumpet blast effect because every one of your creatures is contributing one power, and then if one thing gets through, all of it's getting through. So yeah, that's a good analogy.
Exactly. All right. Um okay, I'm gonna stop this recording just to put the signposts in one video for myself.
Cool.
Um, Signpost uncommon, and then I'm gonna pee really fast.
Cool. Also, I
And
accidentally misread the first card because my uh, laptop was blocking the like bottom right corner of the card, and so I like panically had to like shift it over so I could actually read the cards correctly. That was
I didn't
funny.
notice, so I wouldn't stress too
Yeah,
much about it. Yeah, I think um that clip is pretty long. I think it averages like 3 minutes a card, but that I think
we're
makes
gonna
sense.
get
It's the
yeah
card's like
right. We have to
kind of
give
base.
the
So I think we'll go a
context for
little
the
faster when it
archetypes.
comes to white.
Totally.
I'm just gonna pee, and then I don't like eating on camera. It's a thing that makes me nervous. So I'm gonna eat a little bit of trail mix, and then we can start with white.
Cool.
Okay. Out of my caffeinated beverage, that's probably a good thing. Oh, so that soda machine that I got has the like pods that come in it. Some of them are caffeinated. Oh, dangerous. Ugh. Oh, I love that the Discord's already being used.
I know, right?
It's such an interesting group of people to put together. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be cool. Thanks for doing the organization.
I'm excited. All right, finish chewing this, and then I think I will be ready. All right, I need to give Luna a bath. My allergies are killing me. All right, are you ready to rumble?
Ready to rumble.
Okay, here we are with our first white card. We have Mardu Devotee. It is 1 white for a 1/2. When this creature enters, scry 2, and then it filters your mana for Mardu colors. So instead of tapping for mana, if you use 1 mana, you can change it to a different color of Mardu colors, either red, white, or black. And you can only activate that ability once each turn. What do
So
you
this
think,
is a
Ryan?
cycle, notably the devotees. Um, so there's one for each clan. They're monocolor cards that they filter for whatever that 3 color pairs, colors are. Only doing it once a turn doesn't really matter a whole lot. You're usually only going to need to do that once a turn. But these are kind of important, I would say, glue pieces for a lot of your decks to make sure that you can cast your splash cards. Um, and I think these are also going to potentially enable small splashes of like powerful 3 color cards from different clans. So like if you have a Jeskai deck, but then you have a powerful Mardu card, like you can have 2 of these and one like generic source fixer in your deck and then be able to splash that card. So I think these are like pretty important creatures to just know about in the format. And how good each one of the monocolor ones are, like as a creature on its own that you can play in your deck and isn't embarrassing, I think is going to be like really important. So, what do we think about this one? Like 1 mana, 1/2 ETB Scry 2. Are we happy with that? Are we okay with that as like a body that we're playing in our deck? I'm not really sure.
I think so. Given that red white wants to go wide, and this can help you not flood as much, and what was I had a brain thought. Can help you not flood as much. Oh, and it can help you double spell because it's a 1 mana spell.
Oh, true, true.
um I think that is going to be pretty good. I think most of these kind of filter things, I think a lot of, from just very very brief overview of the set, a lot of the strong cards do look like they're in 3 colors. um and so I do think that's going to incentivize you to want to play 3 colors more often. And so I anticipate these, like, they're never going to be first pick, like, this is the first thing I want in my deck. But they're also going to be, good fixing, and every deck is probably going to need some amount of fixing, so they're going to be a little bit contested. I anticipate this being, like, exactly middle of the road, which to me is, like, 5.5 exactly.
I totally agree, I think, with all of that evaluation stuff. Like, normally, Nicole, you know me as someone who really advocates like playing these boring, straightforward, good curve 2 color decks in limited. I think this set is a Nicole set in the sense that we are going to be wanting to splash a lot. However, we need to do it in a responsible way. And the way to do that is by including a bunch of incidental sources for the cards you want to splash in your deck. These devotees are very, very strong ways to do that because they're just normal creatures that give you an extra source. And so I think they are going to be high priority in the drafts. This one I'm not super excited about for the body, but it's defensible. Like it could even be pretty strong if you really want to go wide and double spell and that kind of thing. So I agree. I think I'd put this like right at a 5.5, which is much higher than I would put it in terms of like its power level as a card. But I think you're really going to need to prioritize these and kind of fight over them in the drafts. If you're playing these like four color soupy decks a little bit that are like pulling the powerful cards, the powerful multicolor cards from different clans, you're really going to want access to these. So yeah, I agree. Five and a
All
half.
right.
Next, we have Fortress Kinguard. One and a white for a 1/2 dog soldier, and when it enters, it endures one. So we haven't talked about this mechanic yet, but it basically gives you an option. You can either get a counter or a XX spirit, where X is like the endure number. So either one counter for this or a 1/1 white spirit. If it endured two, you'd get either two counters or a 2/2 spirit. Pretty strong. 2 mana 2/3 or 2 mana 1/1 and 1/2. Neither of those are that exciting. Having the option's great, and like two bodies for 2 mana, again, quite strong, like we were talking about with the Raise the Alarm card. So nothing incredible, but a solid 2 drop. I think I'll be playing these and be reasonably happy with them.
Yeah, I agree. So it's worth noting that the Abzan mechanic is endure. So this is useful because the counters work well towards the black-green archetype, but going wide with the 1/1s work well towards the black-white archetype. So it seems pretty cool design. You know, this card definitely seems like it's a totally serviceable card. Will fit in a lot of decks. I anticipate it having like a 6.5.
Yeah, perfect. I like it. 6.57, exactly.
All right, this is Bearer of Glory. It is 2/1, 1 and a white. During your turn, this creature has first strike. And then for 4 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Reading this card, it's not particularly exciting to me. You maybe will want to play one in your deck that, you know, has a lot of mobilize and goes really wide, but typically there are better effects than, you know, putting it on a creature. I guess it gets first strike, but we've already seen a lot of 3 toughness creatures. This is something I anticipate going pretty late, and, you know, sometimes you'll take it to be your 22nd, 23rd card or something, but I don't anticipate it being much better than that.
I think I agree. I mean, I think in the mobilized decks, like this, team pump is really valuable when you're making a bunch of these random 1/1 tokens. Um, so, yeah, I maybe a little higher on this than you. I would call it like a defensible, fine 2 drop. Nothing more exciting than that. But like, yeah, if there's a lot of 3 toughness, this gets significantly worse. I think coming from Aether Drift, 2 power creatures that needed to attack to be good, CFT's rule, were pretty bad. So we might be, leaning a little bit too hard in that direction. But it's fine. I think probably like a 7 or an 8, something like that.
Yeah. I'm going to give it
Got a
an 8.
cat walking around
It is
screaming.
unexciting to me.
Cool. All right, I'm good with that. Next up, we have Lightfoot Technique. One and a white for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains flying and indestructible until end of turn. Solid trick. Not much more to say here. I think like this is going to win you every combat that you get into mostly, and it can give something flying and sort of get it in for damage to end the game. It can protect from a destroy removal spell. So strong, worth your 2 mana, but nothing exciting to me. I'd give this like a 6 or a 7, probably like a 7. I'm not valuing combat tricks super highly early on in drafts.
Yeah, I think the only reason that I would originally I would call something like this a 7 or an 8. I just don't value combat tricks that high, but I am going to agree with that like 6 or 7 grade. And the reason that I grade this a little bit more highly than the average combat trick is because in white there are a lot of these creatures that have mobilize, and being able to attack, you know, your opponent needing to block, and then either being able to like blow them out because you know they're going to want to block the mobilized creature, or just being able to protect the mobilized creature to push damage. I think it's probably going to be a little bit better in this format. than it would be typically. And then the combination of this card with Frontline Rush, given that it gives something flying, seems like it might also be strong. So I think I
Sure.
like the 7-ish area.
Cool. 7 for Lightfoot Technique.
All right. This is Osseous Exhale, 1 and a white for an instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may behold a dragon. So this is another mechanic from the set. You may choose a dragon you control or reveal a dragon card from your hand. Um, Osseous Exhale deals 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. If a dragon was beheld, you gain 2 life. It seems like a fine removal spell. Attacking, blocking, removal spells typically, how highly you pick them in drafts are dependent on how good the removal is. Um, and so, we'll see what the other removal kind of looks like. I don't think whether or not you have dragons in your deck is a relevant card to take, a relevant decision to take this card. If you have dragons and you gain 2 life, great. But it's not a reason, I think, to take this card more highly.
I agree. I think at high levels of play, you may even see people not behold a dragon when they actually do have one sometimes with this card. Not that you should do that most of the time. Get your 2 life, it's usually better than the information advantage, but sometimes I could see that, and that would be kind of a cool play. Yeah, notably, this is better as a controlling removal spell than an aggressive removal spell because if you're killing a blocking creature, they've already gotten some amount of damage prevention out of that blocking creature, whereas if you're killing an attacking creature, you're kind of getting full value out of the removal. So yeah, this is for the white controlling decks. I don't know how many of those there will be, but solid, not super exciting. I don't think this is like premium removal by any means. I think giving it like a 6 probably.
Yeah, I agree.
Next we have Rebellious Strike, 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn, and draw a card. So this is a color shifted Candy Rush for people who are familiar with Wilds of Eldraine or Sugar Rush, whatever that was called. Um, this is for the double spelling deck, I think. I don't think it interacts with the. I guess it's pretty good with Mobilize because you can, if they're blocking a 1/1 creature for free just because they're like, yeah, I can kill this and prevent the damage, you get to get them with this, which is pretty nice. But this kind of card, at 2 mana, it's really hard to fit into your curve super smoothly. 2 mana is a lot of mana. Cantripping is nice. Getting in free damage sometimes is nice. But, like, I'm not super excited about this card. I don't think you can ever really prioritize it very highly in a draft. So I'd probably land somewhere on like an 8 for this. Like there will be decks that want it and you might pick it over certain other commons late in drafts to like make your deck good with the synergies, but I don't ever think this is like a premium card.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the +3/+0 might end up being a little bit more relevant in this set than others, which takes it from like, I never want to draft it to I draft it sometimes. And then drawing a card and it being relevant for the double spelling synergies. It seems like it's more of a synergistic card. I'm taking it if I need it for my synergies, and if not, I'm not prioritizing it too highly. All right, we have a coordinated maneuver. This is 1 and a white for an instant. Choose one. Coordinated maneuver deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target enchantment. So this is similar to Collision Course from the last set, just in like the way that it's templated, but it is an instant. So all of the
Thank
time we
God, because
spent
we have
thinking
Mobilize.
Collision Course was an instant. This one feels a little bit more natural, and I do also think it's going to be better in this set. There are, several mechanics that talk about having going wide, making tokens. You can play this after you attack, make your mobilized tokens before they block to deal more damage to a creature. I have not seen how relevant this enchantment mode on this card will be. That definitely, I think, matters. But in general, it's not going to be a removal spell you pick super highly, but if you're in the archetype, it'll be a removal spell you might be able to get when you can't get other removal. So I'm probably putting this somewhere around 7, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, this is. I think we've been talking about Mobilize a lot. There seems to be a lot of cards that work if you get a lot of these Mobilized creatures. So I'm just noting that as like I might need to value those a little bit higher than I normally would think. Um, this is not a very clean removal spell, but it'll get the card you want a lot of the time. The destroying an enchantment, not super relevant in this set, kind of notably. Yeah, I'm agreeing, like 7-ish, somewhere around there.
All right.
Next, we have Poised Practitioner. 2 and a white for a 2/3 creature. It has Flurry whenever you cast your second spell each turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and scry 1. So, baseline 3 mana 2/3. That's not exciting. Very unexciting, in fact. Like, really don't want to be putting those cards in my deck. And then, okay, if we enable the thing, if we kind of get the payoff, it's a 3/4 and you get a scry. Eh, I'm not excited about this card at all. I think the stats just aren't really there. The payoff isn't really there. Um, I think this is like a 9 or a 10, probably.
I agree. I also think it's worth noting now that we're looking at the single color cards that a lot of the multicolor cards felt really powerful, um, and that a lot of the single card color cards don't feel as powerful. That's going to be worth noting. It means that it makes sense because it's a 3 color set, but things like fixing and like staying open are going to be things that you can value a lot in these drafts, because a lot of the multicolored cards, which are higher power, will be more fought after. And so a lot of these single color cards may kind of go under the wayside.
Totally agree. I think your monocolor cards are there for structural support in your deck, and also your fixing is there for structural support. And then what you're really trying to do is be able to play as many of these powerful multicolor cards as you can. That's going to be a really strong way to approach this format.
All right. Tempest Hawk. This is a 3 mana 2/2, 2 and a white with flying. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may search your library for a card named Tempest Hawk, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Is this a reprint?
I don't
Am I
think
losing
so,
it?
but it's a callback to Squadron Hawk. I don't think I've
Oh,
seen
okay.
this
That might
card
be what I'm
before.
thinking about. So cards like this, I always put under the cheeky tier in limited. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer is like fine at base. Typically that is kind of relevant to how good flyers are in the format. But dealing combat damage and being able to get another one, if you manage to get 3 or 4 of these, they end up being more powerful. Um, but they're nothing like ever too crazy. It's like you get a cheeky draft where you get a couple of them and you're excited about it and it's fun and you get to talk about it. And other than that, they're like just fine.
Weirdly, like they often do these collect 'em all cards in limited, which I think are really fun for the mechanics of draft, where like sometimes you just see one going around and you're like, I'm going to speculate on this, and then you see more and you're like, okay, I'm doing a thing. Weirdly though, with this card, I don't think I want to play like 5 3 mana 2/2 flyers in my modern day limited deck, even if they tutor each other up. Like that's just not a very efficient card anymore. I'm pretty down on this card. Like, I might play 2 or 3 as a package that like get themselves if I think my opponent just isn't going to be able to block them. But let's say your opponent just has like a 1/3 reach creature, right? That like is pretty common and limited these days. This does nothing. So
Yeah, and
it,
it's
it
also
not
worth
only does
noting that
nothing, you're
you're
playing more of these cards in your deck that are kind of underrated. So yeah, I think this is like mostly a trap, but I think falls into what you're saying, like cheeky. Like maybe you'll have a package of these in your sideboard and you'll bring them in a certain matchup where you feel like
yeah.
they'll be good.
I picture 3 of them if you're like ever going to play the card being around the correct number. The awkward part about cards is that you can have any number of cards that search each other. Is that you don't really want to draw multiple copies of them. You want one
Right.
to kind of find the rest of them. And in your 40 card limited deck, if you have 5 of them, you're decently likely to see 2 or 3 during the game, which you just don't want. And so you're never going to want to play too many of them.
So this is a collect a few card. It's not a collect them all card, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I agree. I am putting this at a 8. I think I'm saving my nines and tens. Maybe a 9.
That's fair. I would say a 9. It might even actually be a 10, but like I think 9 is like a good way to put it.
I'll give it to 9. I'm definitely saving my tens for things that are just like not limited playable.
Cool, cool.
Okay, so I think you're up for.
Yep. We've got Stormplane Detainment. 2 and a white for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So I think it's just literally banishing light, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oblivion Ring, blah blah blah, all the same thing.
yeah. Uh, these cards are good in limited. I think they're not bombs, but they're very, very strong removal spells. We've seen like one card that kills enchantments, but I think this is not going to be a set where we have a lot of those running around. So this is mostly just an exile removal spell for 3 that sometimes you'll get got randomly. But yeah, this is really good. I would put it at like maybe a 4, maybe a 3, depending on how highly you value removal, how much you need it. Splashable, pretty solid card. We kind of know what this is.
Yep. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. These cards are always good. Having removal that removes anything is always useful, and it just whether it's a 3 or a 4, I think depends on how highly you need to pick removal in the set. All right, this is Arashin Sunshield. It is 3 and a white for a 3/4. When this creature enters, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard, and then it has white, tap, tap target creature.
They've clearly been experimenting with this kind of card in limited environments recently. This is Wreck Remover from Aether Drift,
Mm-hmm.
just slightly tweaked in terms of the design. 4 mana, 3/4, fine, but definitely not exciting body. Enters, exiles some cards from a graveyard. There's definitely some decks that are really going to care about that. Although some of those decks care about cards leaving their graveyard, which is a little dangerous. So this might not always actually like be something you want to do, like we saw with the blue green 2/2 flyer. And then a tapper. Normally tappers are better as cheap creatures in limited because you want to not spend a lot of mana kind of getting rid of or removing, negating your opponent's threat. The tapping is again kind of like a random upside ability here. I'm not excited about this. It'll be sometimes playable, but as a monocolor card that's not super powerful, like I'm going to be pretty disappointed if I end up playing this. I think in most decks.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this at a 9. I'm treating it as a sideboard card that like I sometimes want if it's very relevant against my opponent. But especially with the power level we've seen from a lot of the other cards, by 4 mana, I just want to be doing something better than this.
I agree. Yep, I'm totally fine with a 9. Next, we have Dragonback Lancer, 3 and a white for a 3/3 flyer with Mobilize 1. So when it attacks, make a 1/1 red warrior creature token attacking and sacrifice that at the beginning of the next end step. I don't think we'd actually read Mobilize yet. Pretty good.
Mhm.
Basically, just like a white common Mobilize enabling normal bodied flyer. Nothing spectacular. Like 4 mana 3/3 flyers can vary a lot how good they are in limited formats depending on the flying stats in the format, whether they're creatures that can block them easily or not. I'm giving this like a 7, probably. It'll be
Yeah, I
like a
agree.
common that you play sometimes,
Yeah,
but not all
so
the time.
in general, cards like this, I think you value them a little bit higher if they work with one of your like synergies. So like the last card we looked at doesn't really interact with any synergies that you would want to be doing, and so we value it pretty low. This one does at least synergize. It flies. It has evasion, which is always notable. And so I agree. I think I put this at like a 7.
Yep. I will say that I think I generally want my enabling synergy cards to be cheaper, and this is not that
Mhm.
because you kind of want to curve your enablers into your payoffs, and this doesn't totally let you do that. So yeah, I think never going to be a super strong card, but like we're giving it a slightly higher grade than the previous card, even though they're roughly similar power level, because this clearly like goes in a deck as opposed to the other
Yeah.
one.
All right. So before I talk about the name of this card, I am going to talk about this omen mechanic really fast. Many people have discussed that it's almost like Wizards is tricking us, it seems, and is templated very similarly on the card to adventures, but they are not the same. Omens are sorceries, and then they shuffle the card back into the deck. So these cards are going to have two kind of sides. One that is like a creature. I think most of them are creatures, and the other side is like an instant or a sorcery, and then they shuffle back to be a creature later. And a lot of the time, I think the creatures are typically a little bit more expensive. Just something to note. So this card is called Riling Dawnbreaker. It is 4 and a white for a 3/4 flying vigilance creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gets +1/+0. And then it does also have an omen, which is 1 and a white for a sorcery that makes a 2/2 white soldier creature token. A lot of text.
A lot of text. Interesting, yeah. I think with a lot of these omen dragons, we're going to want to evaluate them weirdly more as the omen than as the dragon, even though
Hmm.
the dragon takes up more of the card, because the omens are the cheaper half of it. So that's the half you're going to be able to play in almost every game if you want to. And then the dragons are typically a little bit clunkily costed, and the reason they're doing this design wise is so that you can play dragons, a lot of dragons in your limited deck to behold them without always having these like expensive cards clogging up your hand. So
Hmm.
the half of these cards is more for like if you reach the late game and you have the mana, you can cast the dragon, and it's definitely going to be better than the omen. But you should be putting this card in your deck because you are fine with playing the omen, and then sometimes you'll play the dragon, not the inverse most of the time.
Hmm.
Um, and overall, this is like a pretty solid package. Like 2 mana 2/2 as a 2 drop, not that impressive, but it's also not a terrible option if you have nothing else to do on turn two. You'll be happy that you have it. And then 5 mana 3/4 flying vigilance that does like a combat professor thing, giving creatures +1/+0 in the beginning of combat. That's pretty strong. I like that ability a lot. I think it's not quite worth 5 mana, but it's very close. So yeah, like this is sort of a 4/4 flying vigilance for 5, I guess, to some extent, although it gives another target creature so it can't pump itself. Card's fine. I don't think anything incredibly exciting. Like I don't think I'm really ever splashing this necessarily. Um,
No.
so yeah, I'd give this like a 7, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm giving it about a 7. Modal spells always have a little bit more flexibility. So, like, maybe if our scale is talking about how highly I draft it, I'm giving it like a 6.5. Like, I'm giving it a slight priority over other 7s, but its effect at baseline is similar to cards that we've discussed taking it a 7.
Agreed.
All right. Salt Road Pack Beast. This is 5 and a white for a 4/3. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control, and when it enters, draw a card.
This is a sweet one.
Yeah, I like this card.
I think yeah, we're both going to be fans of this. Like worst case, 6 mana 4/3 draw a card. That's not great, but if you have 6 mana, it's not a bad way to spend 6 mana. And most of the time, you're going to be spending 4, maybe even 3 mana for this. That's kind of incredible. I'm a really big fan of that. So this is like one of those monocolor cards that I'm actively going to be wanting to put in my deck, which I think is quite valuable and something you want to prioritize early in drafts in this format. So I'm going to give this like a 4. I could even see it getting up to like a 3 at some point in the format, but there's higher impact things you can be doing. This is sort of just a bit of value. So yeah, it's obviously really good with mobilize, like we talked about. Good with endure, the absen mechanic. Really, really strong card. Like very good for a monocolored common.
Yeah, I think I'm probably putting it somewhere between 4 and 5. I agree with a lot of the things you said. The reason I'm probably a little bit lower on it is for specific decks. Like you probably have like wanted to have enough creatures. It's better in the decks that want a 2 spell. With so many powerful like 2 and 3 color cards. I want this to work with the rest of my deck. I don't really want to be just spending 6 mana on it. I want it to be a little cheaper than that and synergize a little bit more. And so, when I think about 3 or 4, I feel like I'm taking like removal spells or things that like really stand alone. And this feels like it needs a little help, so I'm putting it a little bit underneath.
Cool.
But a very good card.
I'm fine with a little bit of difference between us there.
Yeah.
Next, we have Descendant of Storms, single white for a 2/1. Now we're in the uncommons, notably for white. So these cards are going to be a little bit higher power level. White mana for a 2/1. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do, it endures 1. So give it a counter or make a 1/1 spirit. That's really strong. Obviously, this gets a little bit worse as the game goes on, like most 1 drops do, but it'll always do something. Like a 3/2 attacker is going to trade with a real card most of the time. Making 2 bodies is pretty good. I don't think this is any kind of super premium card. Like a lot of the time, if you have a 2 drop to play, you're going to want to do that instead of doing this on turn two. But yeah, I like this card. I would probably give it like maybe a 5 or a 6, something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm probably this is a play style type thing, giving it a little bit lower of a grade. 6 is probably the highest I go. But that is, I have a tendency to draft a lot of like big value decks, and this seems like a format you can do that in. And so, if there are good aggro decks, then valuing this card a little bit higher might be correct. But I don't know. Seeing the other cards and a lot of things at 3 toughness, it feels like my white deck is going to want to play a 2-mana spell rather than activate this effect. You're probably not going to activate the effect more than like once, maybe twice. Um, and so I'm probably putting this at like a 6, but I think that's a playstyle type thing.
Makes sense.
This is a card I'm excited about. This is Sun Pearl Kirin, 1 and a white for a 2/1 flash flying creature. When this creature enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, draw a card. So when I said I was excited about the card, it is because it is a possible flex into a constructed deck. So not that I'm excited about it for limited, but it's a pretty cool card. It's a 2/1 with flash and flying. So 2/1s with flying, typically do get to push some amount of damage. And what's cool about this card is there's a lot of ways you can use it, which is what I like on my limited cards. You can use it to bounce a mobilized token before you sacrifice it to draw a card. You can use it when you block one of your opponent's things. Maybe they use a combat trick and then you bounce the creature to your hand. Or they try to remove one of your things and you use it to protect it. There's just a lot of ways cards like this can be used. They're flexible. And I always value drafting flexible cards a little bit higher because they're going to be able to slot into more decks kind of as the draft goes on. I think I'm probably putting this at a 5,
See you wanting to go
leaning
high.
higher on 5, yeah.
I think I might even go higher. I might go like a
I
3
love
or a
this card.
4. I think this card's like gonna get a card out of its ability a lot of the time. And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a lot of like 1 power flyers, like spirit tokens or anything in this format. Well, sorry, there are
There's a
spirit
mechanic
tokens, but
for
there are
it.
not flying spirit tokens, which is important. Um, yeah, I mean, this seems like a pretty premium card to me, honestly. Like 2 mana 2/1 flyer with flash is like a very solid body, and then most of the time, I think you'll be able to figure out a way to get a full card out of this ability. So that's just a great package. Like I'm happy giving this probably a 4, honestly, maybe even a 3, but yeah, I think 4 is where I'd land on it.
Okay, while scrolling, I am giving myself permission to rate this card higher. I think 4 is probably the lowest I'm going, with a possibility definitely of pushing towards 3. The reason that I'm a little higher on it than I was a couple seconds ago, aside from the fact that I love mechanics like this, is there are several other things this plays really well within the set. There's a couple of enchantments where you can like pick them up and play them again. Um, you know, this reminds me a lot of like the mechanics from Wilds of Eldraine that I really liked in White, where you could like play Princess Takes Flight, and then before it like exiled, you could bounce it back to your hand. Or I love decks. It's why I like the Esper Pixie deck so much. I think I'm probably valuing this card pretty highly. It reminds me of a lot of in a recent limited set cards that we were super high on. Fear of Isolation.
Yep,
It has a very similar effect, but that card ended up being super valuable because it was a flyer, it was 2 mana, and then it also did other things that you could get value out of. I think this card is pretty good.
I agree. Yep. Next, we have Furious Forebear, 1 in a white for 3/1 Spirit Warrior. Whenever a creature you control dies while this card is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 in a white. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. So not returning to the battlefield is kind of rough on this. Um, Obviously, your creatures are going to die a lot and it's going to trigger a lot, but needing to pay 2 mana to just get it back to your hand and then replay it on a future turn, I don't think that's very exciting to me. The body on this is nothing special, so yeah, I guess it does trigger on like mobilized tokens. So that is I guess going to be really easy to do in this set, but I'm not that excited about like a 1 or a 2 mana 3/1 that keeps coming back. Like that's fine, that's pretty good, but I don't think it's the kind of card that I'm going to be adding to my limited deck and saying this makes my deck like able to win games that it otherwise wouldn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm probably putting this around a 7. Like in the last set, I think I had Deathless Pilot probably like at an 8 to 9 just because you didn't have to prioritize picking it. And I do think this is notably better than that for a couple reasons. One, it's cheaper to get back. Also, I think being able to like get it back frequently will really help with the double spell mechanic where you want to cast two spells.
That's
And
true.
so I think I pick it a little higher. It might even like teeter closer to like 6 sounds too high, but like 6.5 I think I could settle on. It just seems like it might work well synergistically with the deck, and it might be a little better than it initially reads, but I still don't anticipate it being like great.
They might have made it uncommon for a reason. Like that's kind of a sign that it might be a little bit better than we're thinking. But yeah, I'm comfortable with the seven. Like I just don't think this is ever going to be a premium card.
All right. We have Storm Beacon Blade. This is 1 and a white for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, draw a card if you control 3 or more attacking creatures. And it has equipped 2. I was very unexcited reading this card. I was like, oh, an equipment, this is going to be expensive. It gives +3/+0, whatever. Like, maybe I'll put that on something that's attacking and it'll be a better attacker. But that has changed now that there is this additional draw card text. I think any deck where I'm playing like Mobilize or Go Wide, I'm going to be pretty happy to have one of these. It is like decently expensive, and those are going to be like pretty aggressive decks, and so I'm not going to be picking it super highly. But I think frequently you will get one of these in those decks, and you might in fact want one.
I agree. Yeah, it's kind of a finicky card. Like the creatures need to be attacking, which is rough. But you only ever need to draw one card off of this to be pretty happy with it. And making all of your little spirit tokens that you made with your endure into really relevant bodies with the +3/+0 and equip two is not that expensive really. Like it's expensive enough, but it's not incredibly expensive. Um, yeah, this is like a solid equipment that will often draw you one card a game, maybe two. So I'm pretty happy with it, but I'm not over the moon. Where are you putting it? I'd say like a six, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say a 7. I think it's just normally I treat these cards as unplayable, so having it any higher, I think it is beneficial. But somewhere around there, like you're gonna know when your deck wants it. So you're definitely not taking it highly prior to knowing your deck wants it, but when your deck wants it, you're probably gonna get one, and so I don't think you have to prioritize it too highly.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Next, we have Duty Beyond Death. One in a white for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This is, I mean, we've continued to say like if you got mobilized cards, this card's really good. This card kind of needs mobilize, I think, to be good
Yeah, I'm
because
processing. This is an interesting
yeah,
card.
you really need a creature that you don't care that much about sacrificing. And to be fair, we've seen that white is sort of like set up to do that. But I guess also, Nicole, like we've been talking a lot about if you have a mobilized creature. Have we seen a lot of mobilized creatures yet?
We've
I
seen
don't
a
think we actually
3/3
have.
flying dragon that mobilizes
Right.
for 1.
Yeah. So
Well, I
I'm
think that
I'm starting
white.
to think that the mobilized creatures might be more important than the mobilized payoffs. Maybe. I mean, we're still early on, so maybe there just are some that we haven't gotten to. But I don't think I'm very high on this card. It's very situational. What
Yeah,
do you
I think
think?
also a lot of the cards that have mobilize are not necessarily in white. So like white is kind of the support color for mobilize, but the cards that actually have mobilize are in other colors,
That could
if I
be
remember
true.
correctly.
That would make
Um,
sense.
and so a lot of what we've talked about in recent limited sets is what colors are kind of base colors and what colors are support colors. So like Aether Drift is a really like pretty polarizing example where green was like a very strong base color. All your green cards were really great. Where white and red were like very clearly support colors. You didn't very frequently want to be playing them on their own, but they did some strong things to support the other colors in the set. And so what it looks like currently is that white is a good support color.
Where are we putting this? I'm on like a nine, probably.
I don't know.
It's a really
I
hard one to
think
evaluate.
I'm probably putting it a little higher than that, just because I do think it will be a good trick in mobilized decks. The fact that it gives a counter and not just +1/+1, I think is a pretty notable change. You can give indestructible to the creature that's making the mobilized tokens, and then they're bigger and can attack a little bit better the following turn. I'm probably putting it a little higher, at least an 8. I think there's a chance it could be a 7, but I would need to play this set to kind of decide how highly I was taking cards like this.
Okay.
Another one that doesn't have a lot of precedent. All right, this is Dalkovan Pack Beasts. It is 2 and a white for an 0/4 with Vigilance. Interesting set of stats here. It has mobilized 3. So we just talked about not having enough cards that, have mobilized. This is a really cool one. I really like the design on this card. An 0/4 where you kind of want to attack with it, but like it doesn't need to be blocked. It's a cool card. I like
Very
it.
cool card. And after reading all the white cards, I'm ready to give this like a 1. That's obviously a joke, but like I think this might be a very, very crucial card to your white aggro decks. Um, I think this is probably like pretty premium. I think this is going to be the kind of card you need a couple of to really make all of your other cards work, like we've seen so far.
Hmm.
I'm probably giving this like a 3, and that's pretty aggressive for a card that like on stats alone isn't anything incredible. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to advocate for giving this a 3. Where are you at?
I'm gonna go a little lower than that, just because I don't think this format is going to play a lot of two color like combinations, and I do think we can find mobilize in other colors. Um, and so I am probably like at a 4 to a 5. Like you are going to want to play a mobilized deck to play this. You are going to need things that care about going wide. It makes a lot of the other support cards a little better, which is one of the reasons to pick it a little bit more highly. But I don't think taking this over like O-Ring, Banishing Light, whatever it's called in the set, or like more premium removal. So I'm probably at like a 4.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
like the
I
card.
guess I could see myself taking this over like just a removal spell like O-Ring. I think it might be kind of that synergy piece that just makes your deck click. But yeah, I think what you said is totally valid, and I'm kind of being a little bit aggressive in the evaluation, so truth will probably be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Next, we have Starry Eyed Skyrider. 2 and a white for a 1/3 flyer. Whenever this creature attacks, another target creature you control gains flying until end of turn, and attacking tokens you control have flying. So, another mobilize payoff.
Ooh.
This body and effect we've seen before in Limited, and it can be really strong. It's a very aggressive card because you really want to enable good attacks with it, and it's not very good at blocking for 3 mana. Um, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical, I would say, to start for this. I just don't think it's going to be that kind of like power card unless you have a ton of mobilized stuff going on and it's giving a bunch of your little tokens flying and getting them in. But like, I think there's going to be other ways to pay that off. And so I'm not super high on this. I'd probably say like maybe an 8. What about you?
Yeah, I'm probably putting it at a 7. I think, it's another one of those things where when your deck wants it, you'll know it wants it, and it might be pretty strong in those decks. And so, having one, taking it a little bit more highly than the other cards that I go back to thinking about, we talked about the 3/3 dragon that mobilized one, or like the wreck remover type card. I think this is definitely doing a little bit more synergistically, and so I'm putting it a little higher than the other cards that I think are like just fine.
Cool. Yeah, that's reasonable.
All right. Rally the Monastery. This is an instant for 3 and a white. It's got a lot of text on it. It says this spell costs 2 less to cast if you've cast another spell this turn. And then you can choose one of 3 modes. You can make 2 1/1 white monk creature tokens with prowess. You can give up to 2 target creatures you control +2/+2 until end of turn. Or you can destroy target creature power 4 or greater.
Hmm.
I think this card is sick.
I agree. It does a lot of different things. What do we think is like the main mode? Is there a main mode?
um No, and that's what I like about this card. I
Yeah,
think I've
yeah.
talked a lot about how I value flexibility in drafts. Um, you know, I probably draft to the point where I need to draft a little less flexibly. Like my very powerful decks end up a little too powerful, and my baseline decks can end up a little bit of a mess because of how flexible I like to draft, but it makes me really like cards like this because, I can take this card and if I'm playing a controlling deck, I'm happy that this can destroy target creature power 4 or greater, which seems pretty good. If I'm playing an aggressive deck, I'm happy that it makes 2 monks with prowess or, gives things +2/+2 to finish them off. I like that it costs less and enables other strategies. I value this card super highly. I'm probably putting this at like a 3.
Okay. Yeah, I think the flexibility adds a lot to this card. If you're casting this for 2 mana, you're almost always getting really, really good value for that 2 mana. If you're casting it for four, you're getting probably like a fair exchange of value just with all that flexibility. So I like it. I think I'd put it probably at like a four. I'm a little bit less high than you are, but really strong card. I agree.
I've
Next,
lost my
Waste.
mouse. Oh, there it is.
Next, we have Waze Speaker Bodyguard. Three and a white for a 3/4. When it enters, return target non land permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. And it has Flurry whenever you cast your second spell each turn. Tap target creature an opponent controls. Interesting. So, 4 mana, 3/4 body, not the best, but totally defensible. And you need a non land permanent with mana value 2 or less in your graveyard, which is, I think, going to be not trivial to have by turn four, which means this isn't always going to get you, to draw you another card, but it sometimes will, and it'll be nice when it does. But the card it's drawing you is never going to be incredibly high impact in like a late game, for example. And then when you flurry, when you cast two spells, you get to tap something. So that's normally going to be tapping something on your turn to enable attacks. The package here is fine. It's pretty good, but I don't think I'm that excited about it. I think I can probably do as good or better with like any kind of other random 4 drop creature, especially like a multicolor one in this format. So I'm probably landing somewhere around like a 6 or 7 for this. I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's totally playable. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm putting it at a 7. What the deciding factor is for me is like, we haven't seen a lot of good 2 drops yet. Um, we've talked about that. We feel like the format is going to be kind of slow, which is a little counterintuitive with, like a pretty aggressive mechanic in Mobilize. But there just like haven't been a lot of 2 mana creatures that seem super strong or super above rate or anything where you're like really gonna want to get them back at common or uncommon. Like if you have a 2 mana rare, or something, then the card value goes up a little bit. But I also think that, this is a card that wants to return something mana value 2 or less, but it's also trying to slot into like aggressive decks because of the tap target creature effect and returning something that's small. And so I'm probably putting this at a 7. I don't think I think it's going to be a little too awkward.
I agree. I'm happy to go with 7. Yeah, I'm not excited about this card.
All right, this is Teeming Dragonstorm. It's 3 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters, create 2/2/2 white soldier tokens. When a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. Or you could use some Pearl
Kieran.
Kieran.
Yeah. This card's sweet. I like it a
Yeah,
lot.
this is really sweet. Unfortunately, 4 mana is not good enough for the Esper Pixie deck, which is what I like to look at every time I see an enchantment nowadays. But it does seem like it's going to be pretty good and limited. A lot of these decks or cards we've seen reference tokens, and these are tokens that don't sacrifice, which is pretty cool. There are a lot of, we talked about those Omen Dragons and stuff that seem like they're going to be pretty available throughout drafts. There's a lot of cards that are stronger than them. But you can play them, and being able to cast this card twice to make 4/2/2s seems really, really impactful to games. I like this card. I think I'm putting it probably middle of the road because I don't think it's like a premium card you have to take early. You do need other things to make it work. Maybe a 5.
Yeah, I agree. I think like 4 mana for 2/2/2s is not no longer like a very good stat line in limited. It's just fine, maybe even fine minus. So I think you really do need to bounce this in at least half your games or even a little bit more than that to be super excited about it. And so yeah, I think I agree with you. Like somewhere middle of the road, probably like a 5. Like you'll take this in the middle of drafts and be pretty happy with it, but I don't think you need to take it super early. So yeah, I like 5.
I agree.
Next, Loxodon Battle Priest. This one's a banger. 4 and a white for a 3/5. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. This effect is always excellent in limited. It's been kind of broken whenever they printed it on cards that cost like 2 mana. So they're kind of costing it fairly now, you could say, at 5 mana on like a 3/5 body, which is obviously not great. It has like a normal stat line. But the turn you play this, you're getting 4/6 worth of stats, and every other turn you're getting more stats. You get to distribute them kind of wherever you want. Notably, it does have to target another creature, so you can't just play this on its own as a 4/6. But I think this card's going to be really good. I think it's probably going to be splashable sometimes if you have like easy mana. I'm quite excited about this. I'm probably giving it like a 4, maybe.
Yeah, I think I like 4 to 5 just because the power level in the set is a little bit higher. But it is especially good that it can help you, get your mobilized creatures to be able to attack safely. And I think that's going to be something that is super valuable. So I like this card. All right, Static Snare. This is 4 and a white for an enchantment with flash. It costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature, and then when it enters, it exiles target artifact or creature an opponent controls until the enchantment leaves the battlefield. This card seems great. It is better than the other exile effect. It doesn't target non-land permanents. It just targets artifacts and creatures, but I don't think that that is bad because I think this is going to be so much better in the mobilized decks where, like one creature with mobilized 2 can make this a 2 mana flash O-ring, and I think that's really valuable. I'm probably putting this card... I think this is going to be one of the first ones to me that like really starts contending with strong rares where like I might want to take this over a rare or something. I'm probably putting this at a 2.
I agree. Yeah, basically no other comments. Like, yeah, everything you said.
It's almost like when there's precedent, things are easier to talk about. All right. So that concludes white. I think this is fun. Are you having a good time?